Welcome everybody to 2024. Sean Durkin here with Jalal Madani. How you
Welcome,
doing?
everyone. Good. How are you doing? How's your
Good.
holidays? Pretty good?
Well, actually, we still have the holiday background up, although it is early in the new year.
It's all right.
Yeah.
We are in a renovation stage, so I think we'll be excused.
You have a good holiday?
I
Take
had
some time
mine,
off?
mine was good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had some time off, but did some work as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So,
What are we doing today?
What are we doing today? Well,
Yeah.
today is an exciting day because we actually have Jonathan Durocher joining us.
Our
Jonathan,
president.
Our president.
Nice. President of
Nat-
Financial Wealth Management, not National Bank here. Nice.
Yep. So he's been joining us. We've been trying to get him for a while, and
We
you can
have.
imagine he has a pretty busy schedule.
Yep.
But he proactively carved out some time to join us today, and we're going to talk a little bit about the investment landscape and
Yeah.
let's say advice landscape
Yeah.
for clients in Canada today. You know, where we see it evolving as time goes on and what has
Yeah.
changed between now and over the past 5 years in terms of how advisors of all sorts interact with their clients on a go-forward basis. So that's coming up
I'm
next.
guessing the next 5 to 10 years as well, possibly. Then.
We will probably cover that off.
Sounds cool.
Awesome.
All right.
Welcome back, everybody. We have with us
Hey.
Jonathan Durocher. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm well. How are you guys doing?
I'm well. Now, Jonathan is the president of National Bank Financial Wealth Management. Thank you. It's been a while. We've been wanting to do.
Yeah, it's been a while, and
I'm.
I was really looking forward to doing this. So this is awesome.
You know, you've been an advocate supporter of what we've been doing, advocate supporter of what we're doing, and we're happy to have you. And what we thought we could talk about today is where we're at in the financial advice industry and the investment advising industry, how we see the future unfolding, and where maybe the trends are coming from.
Awesome.
Makes some sense. So let me ask you. I mean, if you look at today,
Yeah.
you know, let's level set a little
Yeah.
bit. What are clients expecting from the people that they go to for financial advice, whether it be accountants, financial advisors, portfolio managers, et cetera? In your view, what do they want?
Well, I think what changed, over the last few years and is continuing to change is that what they want from their advisors is getting broader and broader.
Right.
And I keep using the same word here, but like advisors are becoming like part-time therapists
Yep.
for their clients. And maybe 10 years ago, they used to go to their advisor for mostly wealth management advice, like
Mhm.
financial plan, estate planning. 10 years before that, they mostly went to them for investment advice.
Mhm.
But now the reality today is they go to them for literally everything that
Wow.
relates to money. So yes, there are assets, but liabilities and spending patterns as well.
And we're seeing that.
And we're seeing that.
Yep.
People go to you guys for literally everything. And that's a change that I think is hardwired and is continuing to grow through time.
And obviously, we're seeing that in our practice. Wouldn't you say, Jalal?
Yep.
So what do advisors do now to prepare for this? Because it's definitely a different
Yeah.
mindset in terms of how you engage a client under that scope versus when I started 20 years ago, where to your point, it was basically give me an investment idea, and if it
Yeah.
works, great.
I think what's changing in that aspect of what do you need to do differently is you need to dig deeper on the relationship between your clients
Mhm.
and money. And I
Right.
always like to say that money is very emotional. So there's not one person who's the same way with it.
Right.
And you can't do that. Back in the days, I called you, hey, I got this stock idea. Yes, no.
Yeah.
Now you got to say, hey, how's everything's changing with your family? How's your kids doing? And what's your life goals?
Right.
And so what's changing is deeper conversations around why are you putting money aside? What makes you happy with money? And these are like profound conversations that can't happen in a 5-minute window.
No.
And that takes time. Like somebody's not going to open up about how they feel about money in a 1-hour meeting. Like you need to dig into it. So it requires obviously more time commitment
Right.
and also more expertise around what's required. Sometimes it's financial planning, sometimes it's estate planning, but sometimes it's also preparing for dreams for retirement or just to have a positive impact on their community with some charitable giving.
Sure. I mean, and look, when you're working with someone with their emotions, obviously there's ambiguity involved.
Yes.
Just not only on the person who's feeling these
Yeah.
emotions, because sometimes it's hard to articulate what you're
Yes.
feeling, but as someone who, especially if you're not professionally trained as a psychotherapist or psychiatrist, right?
Absolutely.
Having to manage it on that side is a delicate, let's say, walk through their lives, but it's a critically
Yeah.
important one.
Yeah. And maybe one thing I'd like to say is for certain people, what they do with their money might sound totally crazy for you,
Mhm.
but very normal for them.
Sure.
And so there's no playbook explaining how money works for people. So you really need to dig into it
Mhm.
and to also accept that wealth management, it's not like math.
Right.
It's not 4 plus 4 equal 8 for everybody.
Yeah.
And so you can't do that without spending the proper time to understand how somebody feels about money.
100%. And you need to be positionally flexible.
Yeah.
You cannot be dug in terms
No,
of you cannot do that.
You got to take your retirement at that age and do
Yes.
this. No, everybody's different. So you got to be able to personalize while also being pragmatic about what things people need to solve for their personal lives.
So we're dealing with an incredibly ambiguous aspect of a client's psychology, which is their
Yeah.
emotions. But there's a lot of things circling around the
Absolutely.
client that's going to obviously change in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
How do you see the landscape evolving in our industry as it relates to working with clients? And what might be the main drivers of those changes?
Well, one thing, there's two factors here. One of the bigger ones is people like to go to their wealth advisor because they know them and they're within their relationship for decades.
Right.
And so the longevity relationship between advisors and their clients is going to be a factor that's going to be a key source of client satisfaction.
Right.
And I'm seeing this because look at any industry you wish
Mhm.
and try to find one person who's going to be with you for like 20, 30 years, 40 years as a professional.
Mhm.
There's none.
Yep.
And so that's a factor that's still growing and taking more importance. And I think also technology wise or changes wise, for sure, things like AI is going to have an impact.
Mhm.
I think also aggregation of data.
Interesting.
Like when
Yep.
people go to you for everything, well, you sort of need to look at everything, and that requires you to have access to all sorts of information that's pertinent to give the proper advice.
Right. It's interesting when you talk about emotional, there's a greater emotional attachment to people who are providing clients with financial advice. I think that applies somewhat to accountants. I mean, a lot of higher net worth folks have the same accountant for years. They have their same legal advice for years, and frankly, the same advice from their financial advisors and portfolio managers. But when you have an emotional connection, that does augur for longer term relationships, because once there's an emotional connection, who wants to break that up?
Yeah.
That's that's not something that anyone wants to have. Is there an opportunity from a technological standpoint to help enhance the emotional connection that advisors have with their clients?
Yeah, I think this is where AI and data is going to play a key role in there, in the sense that, and the funny thing I like to do is go and chat GTP today
Yeah.
and ask the question, will you replace us? Will
Right.
chat GTP replace a wealth advisor? And the answer you'll get is actually a really good one. It's the first time I wanted to high five a computer, but they say themselves that language processing model can't replicate how people feel about money.
Right.
And so AI is going to help us maybe identify opportunities, but then you're going to need an advisor to say, okay, this person's like that. How do I engage that person to actually do it?
Right.
No different than somebody who, especially at this time of the year, wants to, get a new gym membership and gets that nice little, pamphlet at the entry, say, here's how to get fit.
Yep.
And every person's different. So how do you get that person to actually do the exercises
Yep.
that AI or any type of system tells you to do is a whole other ballgame.
Right.
Because you could say, I'm going to put the pamphlet in my bag and I'm going to do my own thing. So I think that's what's going to change. So AI is going to augment the quality of it, but getting people to do what they're supposed to do and the inertia around it, this is where you need a human who understands how they work.
Well, and again, AI can address a lot of the factual issues, like they can, measure twice and cut once and so forth. But I don't see it, at least today, addressing the intestinal fortitude it takes to be successful financially as time goes on.
Yeah.
And the discipline and the repetitiveness and the control of one's emotions. We're talking a lot about that today, especially when things seemingly go wrong.
Yeah, especially where, and I'll use a Morgan Housel quote here, like the definition of wealth is the difference between your revenues and your ego.
Yep.
So as long as humans have an ego, there'll be a role for us.
That's right.
Because it's not math, right?
Yep.
As I said. So this is where AI is going to augment the quality of the advice that advisors could provide to people. But that ego component is still going to be very much out there.
Well, again, when you have a fact-based output, it's it's very difficult for that to regulate being overly exuberant when times are good and overly despondent when times are bad in terms of emotional regulation.
Yeah.
AI can't do that,
No.
at least as of yet.
And AI might say to you, hey, you're 25, you're making some money, you should be 100% equity.
Right.
But why are you not 100% equity at 25? Most of the time, because you don't want to get scarred by having a bad market and say, I'm out for the rest of my life. Like there's things like that are not always rational.
I mentioned this on this podcast before, like Warren Buffett famously a few years ago said the best wealth creating mechanism ever created was the S&P 500.
Mm-hmm.
And he's right. If you invested in the S&P 500 in 1927
Yep.
and stayed with it right through to
Yep.
today, $1,000, you're a very wealthy person today. But Charlie Munger very correctly, kind of jutted in and said, yes, Warren, you're absolutely right. But who would have the emotional fortitude to stick with it? No one.
Tough.
And it's very tough.
That's where that's the emotional connection that creates to it between what the textbook says and what happens to people when we talk about money. Two very different things.
So, over the years, what I've learned, Jonathan, is, in terms of where the industry is going in Canada, is you have to look no further than down south in terms of what, some of the things that, some of the large institutions in the United States are doing. And I'll give you an example. I remember years ago, I'm dating myself now, but I started in the industry in 1998. And fee-based solutions from an investment perspective were coming into vogue in Canada, yet they've been around in the United States for about 10 years prior to that. Now, fee-based solutions are the way to go for the most part in terms of receiving management advice. Do we see anything coming out of the United States that they're doing now that might migrate its way north of the border that might be of interest to clients in Canada or even us at National Bank?
I think two things. One that's still in the verge of getting more mature phase, and one that's coming. Goal-based investing is now getting more mature. It's more mainstream. Most providers out there have goal-based financial planning, and it's good. And that's something that came from the US and got to Canada, and we heavily invested on our side to build our own platform. And that's something that I think still has ways to go.
Right.
And I think the next big one is mostly again on data aggregation. So somebody wants to open their thing and say, I want to see all my assets, I want to see all my liabilities, and I want to know, am I okay? Like, am I doing okay? Not just on my investment, but on everything I have, and that needs to take into consideration spending. And your liabilities, not just your portfolio with a goal. And I think in the US, data aggregation is a little more advanced than what we see in Canada, and that's something that I believe will be coming as the next wave to help us again give better advice to people, and also broaden the discussion with investors on how we could help them.
I've always been interested, and I know we're migrating to that situation, is how can you comment on a client's overall capital structure in terms of how they're doing? And by that, to kind of extend on what you just said, is Jonathan, you look at, obviously there's the easy to track, which is your investments, long assets were worth X on day one, they're worth, Y on day 365. You can calculate a net loss or return. But, if you're applying leverage, for instance, in your capital structure, how do you net out the cost of interest on an after-tax basis against your overall returns? I think that'd be something interesting that you could show some people, especially as the net assets grow. That
and you should always plan for your plan not going according to plan.
Right.
Like there's life events, and that's why engaging the conversation with your investors on how life changes and switch and the decisions they need to make is more important than before. And I think also aggregations can allow them to be able to map out their life goals. A lot of people, they say, I'm putting money aside for retirement. They have no idea what their life goals are with it.
Right.
It's retirement. But what do you really want to do with your money to make you happy? That's going to be something I think an aggregated platform will help us to do.
It reminds me of an old Jewish proverb which goes something like, man plans and God laughs, and that's something that,
There's truth to that.
There's some truth to that. So let me ask you, you're a client now, your age, let's say late 30s to let's say mid to late 50s. You've done a really, fair job in terms of building out your long assets. You've managed your debt accordingly. You have a reasonable retirement plan in place, and you're certainly aware of it on the horizon. What are one or two things that are must-dos at that stage in life to really position yourself to be best in class, best in show in terms of retirement planning?
I think I'll say two things here. I'm gonna have some fun with those. The first one is, if you've been saving money for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and at a certain point in time, somebody says, hey, you could spend it now. People have a problem with that.
Right.
You're hardwired to say, how do I go from a saver to somebody who actually uses the money I've put aside?
Right.
It's easy to say on a piece of paper. It's something else
Yep.
to get prepared for that mentally.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing people forget. Like you turn 65, you retire, you saved enough, but then you say, hey, you could actually enjoy some of this. There's a blockage. and I think that's not discussed enough, and I think it's not prepared enough.
Right.
You can't go in a switch. Okay, now you could stop. It doesn't work that way. I think people are naturally wired, and if you compound that through decades, you say, sure, you could spend $100,000 a year now. They won't be able to.
Right.
So that's for me a big thing that people are not. If you want to have a gold standard a retirement, well, you should have the ability to be able to enjoy
Right.
some of the hard-earned money you've put aside. And I think that's something I'm seeing as a challenge.
So it's a bit of a Rubicon to cross, which
Mhm.
is, at the end of the day, it's like you've accumulated, like it's almost like you've had a habit
Yeah.
for ingrained in you for so long, and then all of a sudden the spigot turns off.
People
and
say, "Oh, sure,
changes.
that you can spend now."
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden you're 85 or 87 and you've got money accumulated. And when you listen to people that are in their 80s or 90s,
Yeah.
and you tell them what their biggest regrets are, it's very rarely, "Oh, I didn't put enough money aside," or "I didn't." No, it's about experiences.
Yeah.
It's about memories. It's about, like, these are things that they want to have more of.
Mhm.
And I think a good wealth advisor will be able to prepare their investors for that period of time.
And I think it's great. I think clients now more so than, let's say, in the past, as they age, they're healthier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know clients of ours that are in their mid 70s, late 70s that I would swear behave as if my, like mid 50s.
Yeah,
I mean
yeah.
that is an absolute compliment. They're smart, they're corpus mentis, and things are becoming more experiential now, more so than ever.
Mhm.
But to your point, it's probably not where it needs to be.
Yeah. And I think also there needs to have a better definition of, what do I want to do with the money that
Mhm.
will make me happy?
Yeah.
For a lot of people today, it's just called retirement.
Yep.
And, our wealth management brochures as an industry, it's, a couple looking at the ocean, holding hands and stuff. It's nice, but realistically, it's more about making sure that what they do with their money makes them happy.
Yeah.
And if you're able to have that, then I think you've got a gold standard retirement. And we're talking about people that are fortunate.
Yeah.
People are lucky to have they work hard for it. But oftentimes it just ends with that sort of, I'm going to go play golf, but then what happens? Well, for some people,
actually, I tried a little bit of a social experiment in the summer, right? I think I golfed 6 times over the span of 9 days. And by the end of 9 days, my arms were ready to fall off. I couldn't get the golf ball in the air. I'm not very good to begin with. And so I know I won't be golfing a lot in retirement, maybe once or twice a week. And that's
test it out. And
Yeah.
and to your point, a gold standard retirement, maybe it's to start practicing some of these things.
Yep.
Let's say I take a little longer vacation. Am I happy doing that? I give to this charity. Does that make me happy?
Yep.
And to test some out before you actually fall into a retirement situation. And then maybe the last thing I'd say once you retired is, back to your point, people are healthy. People are still want to contribute to society. Maybe it's even talking to them about a part-time job, teaching. Like there's that second up. It's not because it's called retirement that all of a sudden, you stop doing everything.
Yeah, you sit in a chair and watch football all afternoon.
Yeah,
right?
no.
it
So
doesn't
and an advisor could help that. An advisor could say, what you want to do is going to make you happy. Is it teaching, or is it something else?
Yeah.
And these are like these profound conversations that goes from, I've got a retirement plan that's in my in my drawer somewhere at home that I've never looked at it, and I've got something that's more animated and discussed with my advisor and their team.
So I want to shift gears a little bit, and thank you for that, Jonathan. That was great. But Amy and I and Jalal by extension, and we've been National Bank Financial Wealth Management now for just over 2 years. Been a great ride. We've learned a lot about the company. We knew a fair bit coming over, obviously.
Yeah, it's good news.
But we learned a lot, obviously, being in the environment. And I gotta say, first off, the culture here is amazing, and I'm going to kind of toot your horn a little bit. You're a big part of it. It's a very happy, positive,
Thanks, guys.
move forward type of culture, but also it's rooted in success. And like again, for 2023, we had a great year. I don't know if we led the firm in net new client acquisition, but I have a feeling we did.
You did a good job. You
Yeah,
did
we
a very good job.
A good job. I mean, our assets are north of, I believe, $150 billion in assets. We are the second largest firm in Canada on the wealth management space from a portfolio management or discretionary management perspective, which is the highest level of licensing in our industry. So we're pretty proud of that. I mean, you got to feel pretty good about those results, which were on the back of pretty solid results in 2022. How do you see things unfolding for us in 2024?
You know what? It's so to your point, it's been amazing years, and it's thanks to the culture and the people.
Yep.
I actually wrote something recently about the relationships, how important relationships are
Yep.
in our business, and yeah. So I think it's the combination of all this together that's making us a great destination. How do I see 2024? Well, there's a big part that's a little of the same. Like if you got a good approach to it, you should compound over time. So
Right.
I think that's going to maintain. But one thing I'm seeing shifting is that over time, as we keep compounding in our business, I like to see us as like a good second quartile fund.
Right.
And what I mean by that is every single year you do really well.
Yep.
You don't do crazy things. You don't do bad things. You just do,
Yep.
and you keep sticking through time. You finish number one.
Yep.
And so for us, it's a bit of that combined with longevity. One thing that it's huge for us is the longevity of the relationship between you guys and your clients
Mhm.
and us with the advisors. It needs to be measured in decades. And when you think in decades, you start taking decisions that are way better than taking decisions on the short term. So for us, there's combinations of that. We're investing heavily inside of our business because we like to be different. For us, the full service brokerage business is so important. And maybe the last thing I'll say is, as we compound it over time, we want to move from best kept secret to a larger dominant player in the country, and it's happening right now.
Well, and thanks for sharing that. I mean, look, the stability that you and your management team bring to us and our colleagues each and every day is not lost on us, and I thank you for that. I think one of the things that you speak to as it relates to Jalal, myself, and Amy, who unfortunately had another let's say obligation, so she couldn't be here today. We talk about the best of both worlds in
Yeah.
terms of working with National Bank Financial Wealth Management. Describe that a little bit, just for a moment.
Yeah, and so here, as a wealth advisor, the reality is you need to mix of both things.
Hmm.
As I said earlier on, if you're an investor, you want to go and see your advisor for literally everything. So for that, you need capabilities of a stable Canadian bank. You need financial markets. You need
Right.
banking. You need credit. You need help with commercial if they want to launch a business. But at the same time, you want to be able to operate your model like a true CEO. And it's a term we're not shy of putting out there. Our advisors are CEOs of their businesses. They take decisions the way a CEO would. They think about their marketing, they think about their finances, they think about their technology. So we're combining that together to create
Mhm.
what we call the best of both worlds. Pretty much the only one in Canada doing that.
Hmm.
And I always give the analogy of a good restaurant. If somebody likes French cuisine, they
Yep.
come in, and I'm going to put the pun on the French thing, but like they got good French cuisine, they come into us and they want a lasagna.
Right.
We're not going to be a good place for them. But if they actually come and like the French cuisine and like that best of both worlds, yeah, we're the place, and it's good for advisors, and it's also good for investors. And that's a really important thing in there. You want to have bank stability and capabilities and longevity,
Hmm.
and you want your advisors to be able to take decisions as CEO for what's best for their investors and their team. That's what brings longevity. So that combination has been really good, and quite frankly, it's something we'll continue to double down on.
Love it. Well, it's very nice to sit with our CEO, Jonathan.
Yeah,
So,
it's a pleasure to be with you guys. Finally, I've been a long time watcher of those podcasts,
Oh,
and
thank you.
it's a big deal to be here. I think your team and yourselves are just exactly what we stand for as an organization,
that.
and we're tremendously happy about the great client experience you bring to your investors as well.
I appreciate that, Jonathan. And hopefully you'll join us again at some point in the
I'm
future.
looking forward to.
Great. Thank you.